Library. Today I will be reading Haunted Florida Love Stories by Christopher Balzano. Today's story is The Love Potion of Lorida. The only motivation more powerful than love is desperation. Put in the wrong situation, a good man will do things he would never have contemplated before. Love may lift your heart, but desperation lowers it. Too often the two play with each other, and those soaring highs of passion can make one sink even deeper when it is not met by another person. Put in a corner, what would you do? What would you do if it was for love? It's unclear what brought the man to the bridge that night, but it was definitely either love or desperation. He met the old woman by a full moon to purchase a love potion, but we do not know his motivation. There might have been a specific woman he had his eye on, or something more economic on his mind. The old woman was well known at the time as someone who was well trained in mixing herbs and conjuring the elements to make things happen. No one uttered the word witch. The people in the town were too dependent on her folk remedies and were too used to consulting her to use that word. There was nothing evil in her eyes or suspicious in her actions to warrant the tag that they saw thrown about describing women with stringy hair and long hooked noses. In some parts of the country, that kind of label could get you killed, and she was useful and harmless, if not a bit godless. But that could be overlooked. She was just an old woman who knew things, much like the medicine men of the Seminole who had been on the same land before them. It's odd that the man didn't ask about the price before he agreed to meet her. It was steep, showing her true intentions. In return for the love potion that would bring his true love into his arms, all he had to do was give her his firstborn child. He was infuriated. He grabbed the crones, swearing to anyone who might have heard them on that night that he would not make such a sacrifice. In the struggle, she fell from the bridge and was impaled by a cypress tree growing near the banks of the water. He knew what he had done would condemn him, and he thought nobody would miss the old woman anyway. Weighing the body down with stones, he drifted her out to the middle of the creek and let her drop to the bottom of the swampy water. Then he ran for a new town, never to return. At least that was his intention. The next part of the story gets hazy. Some say her ghost began to appear on the bridge, pointing to where her body lay on the bottom. Other stories say that by the time the man left town, her body had floated back to the top, revealing his crime. Most of the people who continue to see her don't care which of these stories is true. They just know she is still seen on the bridge, especially during a full moon. It's a story that's been a part of Arbuckle Creek long enough to outlast the town itself, and some modern reports say that she may have gotten her revenge in death. There's more than one spirit on the bridge in Loretta, and they may still be playing out a deal gone bad 70 years later. When I hear a story like this, the first thing I try to do is relate it and see if the story makes sense to the area. Some shout about the way the neighborhood views itself and its invaders or makes sense given to the setting. This legend, while familiar in its elements, seems so isolated that there just might be something to it. While I originally discovered the story on Haunted Places, a website dedicated to listing haunted places, there was enough whispers about it and enough odd moments in history of the town to make it worth exploring. Loretta is a ghost town, another victim of the train boom and its own geography. There was obviously something odd going on there before it was settled. The Seminoles, trying to make their way south during their early period of migration, suffered major casualties trying to cross the lake nearby. They ended up naming it Lake Istapoga, which means lake where someone was killed in the water. The towns grew up around the body of water, and while those who called it home seemed to enjoy the land while they lived there, it rose and fell in less than 100 years. The town was first settled in 1910 when people moved in around the bank of the lake. There was plenty of land to graze and open space, so people started to put down roots. The name was changed from the cow house to Sunnyland to the hamlet of Estepoga. The name stuck, but when the Eckline Railway came through and started a small settlement to coincide with its rail stop on the other side of the water, people began to get confused over which was which, and mail began to get lost. Mary Stokes, who ran the post office at the time, suggested the unusual name Loretta, and it seemed to be a perfect fit for the old settlement. The town found its footing in farming and cattle and grew as the trains came through and roads began to be put down. The town itself had never become as popular or populated as some of the ones around it, with Highway 98 being the only way in and out of town. It's unclear how well the story of the witch is known in the town, and it feels too old to really take place during its timeline. The year 1910 does not really scream witches and superstitions, even in a small town. Rich Newman, in his book Haunting Bridges, over 300 of America's creepiest crossings, put the meeting at 1945, but he's unable to remember when he found that time in his research. The current bridge was built in 1965, and I was unable to find any concrete evidence on when the bridge became concrete. The bridge itself is not high enough to kill an adult who falls from it, and an older bridge would not have been much higher. The cypress tree reference seems like an explanation from someone who told the tale a while ago. Wait, she wouldn't have died from falling from a bridge that high. Well, she actually impaled herself on a tree growing out of the water. Okay, that makes sense. That is the way urban legends evolve. The legend takes an odd turn, though. According to almost all versions of the story, the witch began to be seen on the bridge not long after her death and plagued the town enough for the residents to try and stop her nightly appearances. A mob formed, traveled to her shack in the swamp, and burned it to the ground, hoping that would stop her. It did not work. Several residents of the town say they remember something about an old shack being burned in the town, but were too young at the time to remember more details. It just seemed important and something people were talking about. It might be possible that people in the town were focusing their frustration at the failing town on an older legend of a witch in the swamp. By setting the building on fire, they thought they would be getting rid of some negative element responsible for the lean times, and the 1940s date does coincide with a mass of people leaving the town due to World War II. That would be enough for any small town ghost story, but there are other retellings that paint a more complex picture of what might be going on there. The woman has been known to mess with people's radios, appear to cars on the bridge, and float over the site of her murder in the form of ghost lights. However, there have been 2 other ghosts seen at the spot. According to a follow-up comment on Haunted Places and echoed a few other places online, a man and a small boy have also been seen there. These 2 have been known to duck under the bridge and out of sight and play with the poles of people who try to fish there. Could it be that the murderer did indeed take the potion from the dead woman and use it? It could be that he is paying the price in death and that ghosts are the spirits of him and his firstborn trapped and forced to stay at the bridge until the witch can find her peace. That, at least, is the story some people tell. There may be elements of the story that echo Rumpelstiltskin more than reality, but it's just specific enough to make it seem real. Bridges are focal points of legends, from every covered bridge in New England to the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. But there is something different about this one. The story of the love potion also keeps the legend alive, especially when you consider that it is almost always a woman in the story looking to make the purchase. Men are not usually the ones bent on marriage in the stories, and are not the ones given the decision to give up one of their children. There has to be something going on, but the legend has been told too long to find the original version. Besides, the people who travel the road are not wondering about it. They have to focus their energies on not hitting the witch when they drive over the bridge. Most folklore comes from a need. It may be trying to explain something, or trying to teach the history or an important moment to their community. There is something you can track, which is why they are so appealing to people. We understand ourselves by understanding the story. At Arbuckle Creek in Loretta, there is no lesson to learn, no message to the town, or reflection of community. There's a woman on a bridge and a father and son. There are just a few ghosts and a story told to explain them. If context builds understanding, you won't find it there, and maybe that means the story itself is more truth than tell. That and a twisted love story with an unhappy ending. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to look out for more from Swanee River Regional Library in the future.